expression series, Writing. We are so excited to have Andrew, also known as Monkey, as part of our group. So without further ado, I will let him take the floor and get going.
Mackenzie, thank you so much. It rocks my world seeing all these faces here, and relatively quickly, we're gonna flip over to a PowerPoint thing and I won't be able to see your faces as well, but I've got another monitor over here. So if you happen to see me bopping around, I apologize that I'm not looking right at you. Speaking of bopping around, we're gonna be ping-ponging tonight between a lot of different ideas and concepts. And I'm going to ask you to just kind of give yourself permission to just go and flow and deal with if you find yourself frustrated with something or the writing's not coming the way that you want it to just leave that one behind and move on to another one. Tonight's almost going to be like a CrossFit workout. You know, you like do something super intensely and then you move on to the next thing and then you move on to the next thing and you don't worry about how your box jumps were because you're doing pull-ups and you just kind of moved on to the next thing. So think of it tonight sort of as a CrossFit workout, and we're just going to go and we're going to keep on going. And I'm going to send everybody after this, or Mackenzie will send everybody a copy of the PowerPoint. So you'll have any kind of writing cues, writing prompts, exercises. You don't have to worry about jotting down notes or what was that question. You can just let the flow come through your pen or your pencil and hit the page so that you don't have to create context for yourself. You can always go back and cross-reference that because you'll have the materials that I put up in front of you. Okay, so just give yourself permission to just fly with it as much as you can. Every single one of us is going to get frustrated at some point, and it'll probably be different points for different people. And like a stream, when there's rocks in the stream, you can just kind of flow around it and keep going. And it might twist you around and it might spin you and it might bop you around, but you're still just going to keep flowing down the stream. Okay, so don't let yourself care about it. There's no judgment. Writers, who are the worst judges? We are our own worst judges, always 100% of the time. Way worse than any editors and way worse than readers. We are the worst on ourselves. So you just let yourself go with it. Be frustrated, put a pin in it, go on to the next thing. If some of you have done pieces of the writing expression series before, I know that for very good reason, there's been a lot of focus on memoir, on personal narrative, on journaling and gratitude journal and things like that, really kind of writing yourself. It's been an internal conversation. So tonight is very distinct and different from that, though there will be a lot of similarities in that we're talking about fictional characters. We're going to create a character to dance with, play with, argue with, fight with, whatever we do with a character that you're going to create tonight, so that it's completely different from direct memoir. It's less introspective, though everything inside of you is fair game to put out on the page for this character. There are other times that we can focus on plot. There are other times we can focus on story arc. There are other times we can focus on world building if you're in fantasy or anything like that. Any kind of stuff that we want to work on conflict and resolution, that's not tonight. Those are all super important for storytelling, but that's not tonight. Tonight is character work specifically. If you are a writer who already has a character that you're working on or a story that you're working on, because I know that there's probably some amazing work already underway, give yourself permission tonight to either perhaps not choose that character, create a new one for tonight, or allow that character to do some junk that they may not normally do in the story that you're telling. Let your character play with the exercises that we have. Make this be like if you're going clothes shopping, just try some stuff on. And if you don't like it, you put the hanger back on the rack and you move on to the next thing. Let your character do that as well. If you say, oh, my character would never do that, you shut yourself off before you start. So if you've got a character you're already working on and you want to stick with that character, perfect, but just let them play with us tonight and all the exercises. And also give yourself permission to breathe. It's just, it takes, our energy gets going in our brains and our brains shut everything else down because it takes all the blood and all the focus and all the energy. So give yourself permission to breathe. In through the nose and out through the mouth is good, especially if you got your head down in your writing and throat closes down a little bit as you put your head down and stuff. Just give yourself permission to do as much of that as you can. Breathing in between things and stuff like that. So I'm going to share my screen now and hope that this goes off the way I want it to. Okay. Does I'm assuming that you all see that. And my vibe about this, you guys, is you can take yourself off mute and ask questions if you have questions or if you want some.
Okay.
Are we good? Okay. Let me check one more thing just to get all my ducks in a row here. All right. So I'm going to go back one more. There we go. Okay. So in the expression series, we're focusing on character, as we discussed, and we're going to give ourselves the opportunity to explore stuff that our character gets into. They can be messes, they can be joyous celebrations, they can be a little bit of all of the above. And as we get started and ready to write, I want to get us all kind of on the same page, so to speak. So I want to talk about the perspective of the writer. Most fiction writing, a vast majority, 95% or more, is told from either first person perspective or third person perspective. The differences are, I'm going to super shortcut this for you because this isn't your English comp class. First person, the narrator, the reader has access to the story through the person who is experiencing the actions or has experienced them in the past. So the first person narrative, that character, that main character is going to use personal pronouns like I, me, and we. They're going to be talking about themselves, and they only have access to the things that they know, the things they've seen, the things they've experienced. It's a very personal experience through that one character's perspective. A third person, most of the time, third person perspective in a lot of the novels and things that you've read is an omniscient narrator. It can be a limited narrator, that's less important right now, but third person, the narrator of the story has access to what several people are thinking, if not all the people, characters. So they know, oh, Susie did that and she felt terrible about it, and then Jimmy did that and he thought it was hysterical and he laughed. And the narrator, which then allows the reader, knows what's going on in a lot of people's heads instead of just one person's head. Now for tonight's exercise, let's actually get inside the character that you're going to write and inhabit them. So tonight we're going to work with first person narrative. So if you have the opportunity to write about yourself as the character is writing about themselves or speaking for themselves, it's first person. You'll use I, me, we, and go from a very intimate personal perspective. And that they will experience the world just the same way that all of us do, through their senses, through the experiences that happen to them, how they react to the experiences, and it's all sort of direct and one-on-one. So we're going to jump right in with your pen and your pencil, or your pen or your pencil and your journal, and I just want you to choose a character. It can be that easy. Just choose a character you're going to work with tonight. Now you could choose a different one later and for different exercises if you want to. You can keep the same one all night. Nothing's carved in stone, but just choose a character and jot down a name. Again, that can change too, but jot down a name. It can be a villain. It can be a hero. It doesn't need to be similar to you, or it can be similar to you, but they have a name. For tonight, specifically, I ask that you choose a character that is human or human-like. There could be an amazing story about a dog or a cat or a wolf or something, but for tonight, if you're really committed to writing a vampire or an angel or something like that, that's okay. But it should be something, a character that feels emotions that are recognizable to the reader and has experiences that would be recognizable to the reader. So just for tonight, which doesn't have to affect your writing in the future, please choose a human or a human-like character. And do a quick word sketch. Just describe them. It can just be some single words, it can be sentences, it can be short phrases, it could be bullet points, and let as much of that flow out as you can. Just jot some stuff down, describing your character. If you were meeting up with your best friend and you said, I met this character, how would you describe them? I'm gonna let you go for a little bit, but not a ton of time. We're gonna move pretty quick on this. So just jot, let it flow, flow, flow. How would you describe the character? Okay, now most of the time, when we think of character descriptions, and this is in real life too, not just in our written work, we tend to first go to external lists. And often those are physical attributes. This character is female or male or another gender expression. Maybe we talk about their age. Maybe we talk about their profession, which can have to do with some of their relationships and who else they interact with in a day or a night. We might talk about their wealth or their status. We might talk about their height or their weight or their body type or hair color or what their teeth are like or what kind of clothing they're wearing. Maybe we might, if we're jotting down notes, we might scratch the surface of how they sound, especially if they have like a particularly irritable laugh or a scratchy voice or a hoarse voice or something that's a little bit different than what other people might sound like. If there's something distinct, we might talk a little bit about a voice style. But for the most part, it's those kind of attributes that we tend to write down. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the kind of stuff a reader wants to know. That's the kind of stuff that your friend that you were describing them to wants to know. That's the kind of ways that we describe things and people. But there's a fascinating thing about the human brain in that in the 5 senses that we have, and right now we're just going to talk about 5. I know that often we talk about a 6th sense or a 7th sense, but we're just going to talk about the 5 for sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Of those 5 senses, brain chemistry wise, smell and taste are the 2 that are most connected to memory, and they're the most evocative. And they're the 2 that writers write about the least. They're the 2 that writers use the least. They're not as accessible. We talk about what we see. Sometimes we talk about what we hear. We might talk about what we feel if it's raining outside or it's hot or it's cold or something like that. There can be some physical sense of touch or feeling. But when we rarely write about taste and smell, and yet those are the ones that can pull brain memories out from the deepest recesses for us. So next exercise, we're going to do a sense memory for your senses. And I want you to think for a second about a cherry candy. Like those little hard candies. They're in a little clear wrapper. Maybe it's round, or a Lifesaver or a Jolly Rancher or something like that. A hard candy, cherry flavored. Very specifically cherry. Just kind of conjure that up in your brain. Now think of an actual cherry, the fruit that comes off of a tree from the store, off the tree at the farmer's market. The actual cherry and the artificial cherry are wildly different flavors. There's kind of nothing they have in common except maybe the color red at best. The flavor of a hard cherry candy, which to me kind of grosses me out because it tastes like a cough drop. But it's not a flavor that bears a lot of resemblance to cherries, to actual cherries. But we all know it. If you put a blindfold on and somebody handed you that candy and put it in your mouth and said, "What flavor is that?" you would know it was cherry. And the same thing for grape and lime and banana and all those sort of artificial flavors, even though those artificial flavors don't bear a whole lot of resemblance to real life. So write down a list, super short, just 5 descriptive words or phrases about any artificial flavor of your choice. Any flavor, it doesn't have to be cherry, it can be. Any flavor of your choice. And if things go too quick, you can always go back later and do it. But 5 descriptive words or phrases about an artificial flavor of your choice. Now, not using any of those 5, write at least 3 words or phrases about the natural flavor that it was supposed to be, that it's based off of. If it was banana candy, you write real banana. If it was root beer, you want to write about well, that's pretty close because it's all artificial. But fruits are easier. Use at least 3 words or phrases that you didn't use for the first 5. Okay. Now, the artificial flavor can tend to be the shortcuts that we use in writing and that a lot of writers use. They're shortcuts. They're the cliches. They're like, oh, it was sweet. Oh, you go straight to the easy description. Because as a writer, you want to find commonality with a reader. So you want to have shortcuts. You want to do the quick, easy things. So I'm going to encourage you to strive for the super descriptive instead of the first choice, instead of the right off the bat, because the right off the bat can tend to be the artificial flavors. Now, when we're thinking about senses, you can jot this down. How might your character's senses be different than yours? It's a little bit of an esoteric question, but how might your character's senses be different than yours? What if your character is colorblind or has a hearing impairment or is a very, very different age than you are or has very, very different life experiences and therefore moves differently, experiences the world in very, very different ways than you? You don't have to come up with concrete examples, but think of how your character is very, very different from you in their senses, the way they experience the world. And that can just be something that you kind of come back to during other writing things of your similarities and your differences from the character that you're creating. Now, in the world of senses, probably some of you are familiar with, there's an exercise that counselors do and crisis counselors and psychotherapists and camp counselors when somebody is having terrible anxiety or panic attacks or just really kind of got themselves wound up. And it's a kind of a simple exercise about grounding yourself in your senses. And it's usually called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's an exercise you might be familiar with. And I'll explain it a little bit more thoroughly as we go, but 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 really gets you centered and grounded in the things that are going on right now. So you get a little less out of your head about panicking about the future or what you're supposed to be doing or not supposed to be doing. And that stuff that anxiety gets us all, puts the blinders on us. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 gets you a little grounded in what's happening right now. And the person who, you can do it for yourself, but if a person's leading you through it, they'll say to find, think of 5 things that you can see, 4 you can feel, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. So we're going to do that for your character. Okay, so put your character in a familiar space to them, where they woke up this morning. Okay, where they wake up most mornings. If today in your story is totally unique and they woke up somewhere strange or they don't know where they are, then put them in a place where they are familiar, even if that was in the past, last week, last month, last year, a place that they are used to their surroundings. And have your character look around and write these down and find 5 things that they see. And again, go for the unique, go for the specific. Don't do the artificial flavor version. Don't just say door, computer, lamp. Get into some details. The door with the peeling paint that I know I have to fix next weekend. The lamp that was my grandmother's and it used to be on her dining room table. Give yourself permission to expand those out and be super hyper specific. Readers want it. Readers have such an appetite for hyper specificity. 5 things that your character can see. They don't have to be in your room. Be whatever space you put your character in. Next, 4 things that your character can feel. And by feel, that's not emotional. Feel, that is tactile. That could be temperature. It could be moisture if it's raining or snowing or a dust storm. It could be the sense of clothing against skin or not clothing against skin. Air moving, things that you feel with your sense of touch. 4 things that your character can feel in this familiar space for them. Then 3 things that your character can hear, and make them have to really listen. Make the character have to really listen. So it's not just the CPU fan on my computer, which I happen to hear right now, but it's go a little deeper. What else do you hear behind stuff? Your character. 3 things that they hear. They can be recognizable or they could be wildly strange. You get to create whatever you want it to be. And two things that your character can smell in the space that they're used to. They may or may not be recognizable smells or familiar or normal smells.
Hold on, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, two things that your character can smell in the space where you put them. And they can be smells that they recognize, or they might smell something weird. Like, what is that? You can choose whatever you want it to be, but two things. And then the final one is taste. And taste doesn't necessarily have to be when you're eating. It could be, you might be able to taste what you ate earlier, or you brushed your teeth, or whatever that can be. But one thing that the character can taste. And that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 works for us as writers and as human beings, but it can also work for your character to just ground them in the space, because those kinds of details make writing fascinating, and readers want that stuff. I told you we're moving fast. Who can do a horse lip shake? Stretch yourself out a little, stretch your face. You don't have to stretch your body if you don't want to. You can stretch up a little bit. Just get a little movement going. Get the kinks out of your neck a little. Let yourself stretch your thinking, your face, your mouth. And get a good deep breath in through your nose if you can. And a big exhale out through your mouth. So this emotion wheel should be something that you all got ahead of time. Hopefully it's kind of familiar for you. If not, hopefully your screen is big enough that you can sort of see it. And I just want you to choose an emotion on this wheel from either the middle ring or the outer ring. Not the center. The center is too basic. It's too much the artificial flavor versions. It's the shortcuts. But there's some really delicious words in the middle ring and in the outer ring. So choose one that speaks to you for some reason. Somehow resonates for you. And even though I have 3 screens, all of your faces have disappeared, so I don't see you. Does anybody need more time to choose one? If so, unmute yourself and say something. Sweet. So you've got your choice on the
Sorry,
wheel.
Monkey.
Yes.
Sorry. Did you say the middle one? I'm still trying to pull it up on my computer. I'm looking at my phone.
Sure.
Did you say the middle ring?
Either the middle ring or the outer ring.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of options, either middle ring or outer ring. Just don't use those center ones. They're too basic.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, because life and interesting reading are often about the twist that you don't expect, I have 2 dice in my hand that I'm shaking. And I rolled, and I got the number 8. So please count 8 words clockwise from the one that you chose. And that's your new word. So go 8 spaces clockwise from where you thought you were going to be to your new one. All right. Jot it down in your book or on your page, what your new word is. And just complete this sentence with finishing 1 sentence or writing a few sentences. I am feeling so blank, whatever that word is, because, and build out why. We want to know the incident, what actually happened to make that feeling happen, and what your reaction was to it. So if my word was happy, which it wouldn't be because that's from the center ring, I'm feeling so happy because I just won the lottery. And it was the most amazing thing, and blah, 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 and you have to write about that. Get a good full sentence, the I am feeling so blank because, and keep going, get another sentence or 2 out. It's not that you have to super speed write, but just let it flow. Don't judge it, just let it go. Let it go and flow. That emotion wheel or versions of it, and there are lots of different versions of it, is a tool that I always have near me when I'm writing characters. Because I'm looking for synonyms. I'm looking for not using the same darn word over and over and over. I can't have a character be disappointed, 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 disappointed. I got to find some more words. It's a really great tool. So feel free to use that when you're writing, when you're creating a world for someone that makes a reader not want to see redundancy, even though you're trying to express some of the same feelings in different ways at different times in your writing. All right, we're going to keep on scooting on through. So the next one, I'm going to talk a little bit about it before I flip the slide. When actors first sit down with a script for, if they're going to perform in a play or a movie or a television show, they get their script, their lines and the actions that are written for them. Actors do some work on what they call the character's need or overarching need. And they make a choice for the character that they're going to play. What does this character need most of all in the world? Now, there are a lot of psychologists that will say that humans have overarching needs, and we may or may not be super aware of them, but we all have them. We all have versions of many of them, but there's one that really drives us, and it can be subtle and behind the scenes, or sometimes it could be very intentional, that you have overarching needs. And in fact, there's only a few of them. There are different ways of saying the same thing, but there's only a few overarching needs. And real people have one of these and some of all of these. And you're going to get to choose which one is most important for your character. So the first one is get love. The biggest need in their life, the way they define themselves, is whether they are able to get love. And that includes respect and passion and approval and appreciation and honor. It really matters about their connection with one or many other people. Their driving need in life is to get love. Another need they might have, and again, we all have some of all of these. Another need they might have, and if somebody is driven by this one more than anything else, it's a very different vibe, and that is to find self-love. That includes finding esteem or confidence. And it also includes finding your purpose in life. I'm here for a reason. I was born for a reason. I have a reason to be here. The way I'm going to make my mark on the world is this. So that's all part of finding self-love. Another thing that drives all of us sometimes, and some people all the time, is the need to get power. You have to get power, or the most important thing to you is getting wealth. And you define yourself and your identity through what you have, through what you're able to get, possibly take, or win, the power that you can have that can show up as part of your identity, the seeking that power or getting and holding on to that power. Another driving need for human beings, possibly for your character, is the need to feel safe. We all have the need to feel safe, but that can become the driving, overarching need if perhaps something made you not feel safe or currently doesn't. Think of horror movies, think of adventure movies, think of adventure and horror books, TV scripts. The need to feel safe becomes the dominant force. And that can be physical safety, it can be emotional safety, it can be spiritual safety. Another driving force is to find the connection to a higher power or nature. So this can be spiritual life, this can be church, this can be a god or many gods, or however your character defines themselves, and also the connection to nature. They're really, the thing they're seeking most is that connection to something outside themselves that is not necessarily another person or people. And then the last one, which can become very important for people and can be a real driver, is to get rid of something or to get rid of someone. So choose one of those. And again, you can always change, nothing's carved in stone. Choose one of those that is your character's overarching need. It drives everything. Now, in real life, there's usually more than one. There's usually some of this is always playing. You meet somebody new and something comes in and becomes more important. but there's always one of them that's more core than the others, and it informs the choices that they make. And let's think about some easy combinations. Like, I want to get stinking rich so that everybody in the world will love me. Okay, so that's my need is to get power, but why? It's for the reason to get love. Kind of easy to see how one of them can fuel the other one or lead itself into the other one. So you've chosen your overarching need that you just jotted down for your character. Now choose a secondary one that feeds it. Like, I want to get filthy rich so that people will love me. Or I want to be in charge so that people will love me and I'll finally get the approval and the honor that I've deserved my whole life that nobody ever gave me. Or I really need to find my sense of self-love so that other people would love me. Or I really have to find my sense of self-love so that I can feel safe. So think of a second one that fuels the first. And then you can just jot this down and nobody needs to know your answer. Can you identify which one of these, if you're being completely honest, for you as the writer is your driving force? At this moment, tonight, doesn't have to have been your whole life, but tonight, which one's in charge? Which one of these gatekeepers of the universe are in charge of you right now? That kind of stuff is the stuff that readers really want to understand about characters. And sometimes it's super subtle and woven in, and sometimes it's more obvious. But if you can infuse your character and your scenes and the relationships between characters with some of these dynamics, what if two characters are in a scene and they both want the same thing? Or what if two characters are in a scene or a relationship and they want wildly different things? What kind of tension does that create, or what kind of harmony does that create? So now another aspect to human nature, so we're going to move on to the next one, is how we stop ourselves. Because we all do. Every single one of us stops ourselves. We have limiting beliefs and we have blocks that get in the way of us doing or getting what we want or what we need, or what we believe that we want or that we need. Something stops us. Something stops us from doing the stuff we know is good, or we know we should be doing, or maybe we don't even know what it is yet, but we all have stops. And those can be kind of categorized as well. And I know human beings are infinitely variable and we don't want to get super generalized, but I have a whole bunch of these and I want you to kind of look from your character's perspective, which one of these sounds familiar for your character. So one of them is the internal conversation about, I don't really want it. I don't want it enough. It's not important to me, so I'm not going to do it. And again, all of these are probably somewhat familiar to all of us. There's a second conversation that goes on inside people's heads that is, it doesn't matter what I do, I can't have an impact. I'm not important enough. There's another one that's a little bit similar to that, which is nobody's going to notice. I could do the thing or find the thing or get the thing perfectly and nobody will care. Nobody notices me. There's another internal conversation that people run on themselves that say, if I try this, people are not going to like me, or I'm going to make a fool of myself. I'm going to look like an idiot. They're going to think less of me. I'm going to embarrass myself. There's an internal conversation your character might be having that might sound familiar. You have this whole thing like, I'm a quitter. It's just what I do. I always give up. I never complete things. I never follow through. Everybody knows it. They've been telling me that since 3rd grade. There's another one that says, I'm actually trying, but I'm doing the thing wrong. I don't have the required knowledge or the skill or enough practice. I'm brand new to this. I don't have the expertise. So I'm doing it wrong. I'm messing it up, but it's not my fault. I just don't know how to do it well. That also shows up as something we call imposter syndrome. Somebody thinking, oh my gosh, people think I have my act together. If they had any idea, they would drum me out of this place. So imposter syndrome shows up when you don't believe in yourself, that I don't have what's required to get the job done. There's another piece that people use on themselves, which is that somebody else ought to be the one doing it. I'm not the right one. They're better than me. They're skilled. They've been doing it for decades. Why should I try this? There's a version that's similar to one we said before, which is just, I always fail. I'm not good enough. People have that conversation going on inside their heads. I always fail. I'm not good enough. And that stops them from trying things. It's a limiting belief. A little bit different from that is it won't work. The project or the thing will fail. The question I want to ask, the thing that I wish I could do. There's one that's all about, it says, oh, it's too late. I missed my chance. I don't have time. I've got other things to do. Timing's wrong. It's going to take too much time. I don't have time. I'm busy. Similar to that, people have an excuse or a limiting belief about it's too expensive. I can't afford it. It's not available to me. Only rich people can do that. And then the last one on this list is I don't have anything to say. I don't add value. Whatever I do doesn't add value. So choose one of those. I just jot it down, or some version if you want to reword it yourself. It's something that your character's got going on. And then you can come back to that later and write your way into it or out of it. And again, you guys will get this thing if you want to go back to this and refer to it later for a different character or a different scene or a different feeling.
Hold on. Didn't hear you. You're gonna have to say that again. Do what again?
Sure. So you've just jotted down which one of these is really kind of running the conversations inside your character's head right now. And later you can come back for a different scene or a different character or whatever. I'll send this presentation to you, so you'll have these files and you can use this for future writing or future characters.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. All right, we're going to scoot along again. Shake your shoulders a little, stretch your neck, ear down to one shoulder, ear down to the other one. Turn your whole head and look across the horizon, look over one shoulder, look the other way. Deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. All right, physical perception. The way your character sees themselves. Okay. Now think of something physical that your character feels some level of shame about or uses to compare themselves to others, and that they deeply wish they could change. There's not a human being that doesn't have something or many things like this. But for this exercise, I want it to be something that you personally, the writer, do not share with the character. Something that is distinct and different from you. Something your character, some physical thing, attribute, situation, condition that your character has shame about, might use to compare themselves to others, and that they deeply wish to change. Jot that down. And now in a few lines, I want you to have either an internal monologue or dialogue with that body part or physicality or condition. It's a little bit of an imagination stretch. Oh, I'm having a conversation with this mole that the doctor said I have to have cut off. And I'm going to have this conversation with this mole. Or I'm going to have a conversation with whatever the character is having, has some shame about, wishes terribly that they could change, and that they compare themselves to other people. It could be a medical condition, whatever that they wish was different. And write a few sentences talking to that thing, to that medical condition, to that difference, and how you feel about it. What does it bring up? Are you angry? Are you ashamed? Or not you, the character. Angry, ashamed, figuring out a way to celebrate it, to embrace it, wishing you could figure some things out differently, as to your relationship to the physicality. And again, you're writing in first person. It's not you, the writer, it's the character. Some of the things that can come up are, you know, you have too much power over me. I've let you get away with too much. I'm the one who's in charge. I'm taking my power back, taking my esteem back. You work on that for a couple minutes. No one needs to read it. It's not the correct thing because there is no correct or incorrect. Let yourself right into it, into it and through it. Right? If there's more to come back to later, you can always come back to it. And this one's a little bit simpler. How does your character stand? If they stand. You don't have to write this down, just visualize it. Do they stand up straight and tall? Do they slouch? This particular day, are they exhausted and that shows? Do they favor one side or the other? Are they a trained dancer who stands in first or second position or something? Do they use an aid or assistance to stand if they stand? If they don't stand, how do they sit? Just visualize it. If anything comes to that you want to jot down, you can, of course. It's kind of how they show up in the world. And is it different if their boss walks in, or their partner, or a stranger, or someone who suddenly makes them feel threatened? Does their physicality change? All right. We're going to scoot into what I call a blended exercise. Okay. So we're going to use you, the writer, an incident of your life as fuel, and you're going to give that incident to the character. Okay. I'm going to explain that a little bit more. So think of an incident in your life that you wish had gone differently. It can be recent, it can be far, long in the past. Something that has happened in your world that you wished had gone differently. I wish I had asked for that raise. I wish I had defended myself. I wish I had defended somebody else. I wish I had been my own advocate at the doctor's office. I wish I had apologized. I wished I had said the words that were left unsaid. I wished I had made more time for more important things. I wished I had declared love. I wished something that you wished had gone differently. And give it to your character. Give that experience, put your character in that world. Your character has that wish that something had gone differently. And now I want you to change the incident. And I want you to jot down, these can be short, 3 alternate responses or outcomes that are different than the way it went down in your life, the writer. Totally different. You can be as wild and crazy as you want to be. A UFO landed and it beamed me away and then everything was fine. Whatever you want to do. It could be very intimate and specific and human. It can be large scale, small scale. There's no right or wrong. But for you're going to write 3 of them. The first one, your character is more vulnerable than you had been when this event happened to you in real life. So the first one, write it when the character had a harder time or was more vulnerable than you did. And and write what they did in that incident. Then in the second one, in number 2, your character is more resilient and they're victorious in the situation. Doesn't mean you necessarily failed in the situation in life, but you would wish it had gone differently. The character is more resilient. All those things, like when you walk away from a situation that's been stressful and you're like, oh my God, I wish I had thought to say that. I could have, no, if I had thought of that zinger, I could have said it and I'd feel so much better. Or I wish I had done, your character has the ability to have that hindsight and might say the thing or do the thing. And the third one's dealer's choice. You can write whatever the character can come from whatever perspective, but it's a different ending or outcome than what happened in your world. One, two, and 3. And this can very well be one of those that you come back to later. I'll give you another minute or so. This one can be a lot of fun to come back to later. So the next area to focus on is forgiveness. Not a single one of us in our lives that doesn't have somebody that if we forgave them for something, it would free us up a little bit. So who must your character forgive in order to re-energize themselves or reclaim themselves and move forward with confidence? Who must your character forgive to unhook themselves from something that's happened in the past with someone? Jot down the person that needs to be forgiven, that your character needs to forgive. If you have a name, jot down the name, maybe the relationship. It's my wife, it's my grandmother, it's my kid, it's my boss. Who must your character forgive in order to re-energize, reclaim themselves, and move forward with confidence? Write down, what are they being forgiven for? You just get to make it up. What did they do that your character needs to forgive them for their own safety and sanity and sensibility? Doesn't mean they weren't horribly wronged, but they need to forgive this person for their own freedom. And write down, how will they be told? How will that person be told that they're being forgiven? Is it a face-to-face talk, a letter, a phone call, a text, an email? Using a third party, hey, go tell them this? Skywriting? How will the person know that they're being forgiven? And how will that person react? Write at least a quick sentence about how that person will react when your character forgives them.
So, just a question, Monkey.
Sure.
So, all this writing, right? You said it's all fictional, but it's like so it's kind of like you're doing therapy through like writing.
Seriously.
Right.
Yep.
Like honestly, you're making it seem like we're you're only changing up a few details, but you keep on making the mistake of saying maybe your wife or maybe your boss. So I'm like, is this really fictional, or are you just trying to make us write therapeutically, fictionally, technically about ourselves? Question.
Yeah, I
it's an
feel seen.
awesome question. It's an awesome question. My hope is that that's not super distinct. Quite honestly, you can write as separately from your character as you want to, or you can write as braided together with your character as you want to. And every writer does this. Every work of fiction, every children's book, every young adult novel, every grand literary piece of work, characters come from writers, and there are pieces, and you invest pieces of yourself in them. You don't need to invest yourself in these exercises. If you find that you do, one of the main thoughts about tonight's workshop is the way that you can look at some things that maybe have happened from different angles, not because anything was supposed to be different, but that in another world that you can create, things might be different or could be different. Does that make sense?
Monkey, do you find, because you are a writer, do you find that in the world of, fictional characters, that it's easier to identify with your character, or do you feel like it's a beautiful way to allow what could have been and really allow them the fantasy of a character come alive? Like, is there a way, like, which is the right way? Because I find, like, through all my pages of notes, I'm like, is that coming from me and who I am, or is that coming from this character?
I think it's wildly different each time you sit down to write, or each character that you take on. I think that there are some characters you can just totally be like, ha, 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 I got revenge. And you can like live out your revenge fantasies, or you can put them through the ringer, or you can be as powerful as you want to be through them. It's a brilliant testing ground for real life. It's a brilliant testing ground for strategies. And maybe it would work for the character, but wouldn't work for me, or maybe it did work for me and wouldn't work for the character. And writing is rewriting, and you kind of finesse it and you go back to it and try it again. But my hope, and what I have found when writing fiction, is, oh yeah, oh, I didn't think, I wish I would have thought of that. Oh, that's a possibility.
Yeah. This forgiveness piece is huge too, because, right, the forgiveness is always for us. It's never for the other person.
Yeah.
And if you can use this just for a forgiveness piece, is beautiful. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So there was the 4 questions. Who was she forgiving? Why? And then how did they know they were forgiving? But what was the 4th one?
How that person will react.
Oh, okay, thank you.
How our character will react, or how that person that they're forgiving will be reacting?
The person that they're forgiving.
Okay.
The person who needs to be forgiven, how they will react to being told or discovering or finding out that they have been forgiven for a thing. Okay. Leave some space on the page if you want to go back to this one later. Forgiveness is a big thing. Boy, I don't have it mastered in real life. Distraction and domain shifting. So this is the techniques, whether chosen or unchosen, conscious or unconscious, that your character uses to put off doing the hard stuff or the boring stuff, the stuff they don't want to do. The unpleasantness. This is how your character procrastinates, doesn't want to do difficult or mundane tasks. Even if they know it's something they ought to do, I ought to exercise, I ought to eat that salad instead of those French fries, but they still avoid it. They shift their focus, they domain shift, or they distract themselves away. How does your character do this? How do they find a way to do something else, prioritize something else, Do they make other things important? Do they make it so that they don't have time to do the dumb stuff, the boring stuff? How do they avoid things? We all have different tactics, and probably we have a bunch of them. We get pretty well practiced at it, especially through our teen years. We get pretty good at putting stuff off. So now just choose something that your character is avoiding and has been avoiding for a while. Might be nagging at them, might not. They might care, they might not particularly care about it, but it's something that they're avoiding. What is something that your character says, like, don't even talk to me about that. I don't want to know. I don't want to think about it. It's not worth my time. Get it out of my brain, get it out of my head, get it out of my face, get it out of my life. Sometimes those are super tough topics. Be something about medicine or health, something about relationships, something about intimacy, something about cheating or being cheated on, something about politics or money or family dynamics or job loss or wishes. Could be someone shutting down their wishes or deciding that they're not going to actually get them, maybe if they're later in life. Something that they just avoid because if they look at it too long, it's going to bum them out or anger them or devastate them. Just jot down one thing that they're avoiding. And later, that would be a really interesting thing to write into. You could write pages and pages and pages about that and the techniques they use. And now we're going to move into instinct. So this is a word sketch. Again, I told you we're moving fast. We're doing CrossFit. Do a word sketch about a time that your character chose not to do something or not to go somewhere that they had planned to go or do, but they had a hunch that they didn't want to or weren't going to follow through or shouldn't follow through. Just a word sketch, a quick couple of sentences, statements, phrases about a time your character chose not to do something they were totally planning on doing or go somewhere they were totally planning on going. And make it save their life. I was supposed to go to work, but I had to stop to go to the ATM machine and a car ran into the front of the building.
Wait, sorry. What they stopped to do saved their life?
They're following their instinct instead of their plan saved
Gotcha.
them. Their gut instinct told them do something different than what you thought you were going to do, and it saved their life. You guys are amazing. We're like running a marathon. There's a couple more. Self-care. Just pick and jot down 2 self-care practices your character uses as a go-to when they're stressed or overwhelmed. 2 self-care practices that your character is comfortable going to when they're stressed or overwhelmed. Here's the thing, at least one of them has to be one that you don't normally do. You as the writer don't normally do. But your character, at least 2, you can write down more if you want. What are some normal go-tos that people think of as self-care? I exercise, I eat something specific or cook, I go outside, I meditate or do yoga, I take a bath, I read something, I binge watch, I game, I draw, paint, sculpt, write. Something that is indulgent just for themselves, doesn't have to be indulgent, but that could be indulgent just for themselves. 2 self-care practices to really nurture themselves, a kindness from themselves for themselves. And at least one of them is not your usual go-to. All right. And the next one is 5 actions toward healing. So think of, for your character, could be whatever you want it to be. Think of a tragic or devastating event that happened in the past, as far back in the past as you want it to be. Could have been moments ago, could have been decades ago, but it has happened to them in the past. It's not happening in the present. And in response to that, list 5 actions toward healing that they can take. And the caveat to this one is at least 2 of these actions to healing have to be ones that you, the writer, have done. Now, some actions to healing can be huge in the moment, and from the outside, somebody might not think they are. Getting out of bed can be titanic as an achievement some days. Getting up, taking a shower, going to work instead of calling in sick. Those can be huge actions toward healing. They don't have to look huge to anybody but your character. Tiny miracles. Five actions toward healing, at least 2 of them that you've done before in your own personal past as a writer. Five actions toward healing. I finally made that doctor's appointment that I've been putting off. I got the brakes fixed on my car because I started to decide it was going to be horrible if I didn't do it. You know? Actions that could be taken toward healing. Just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Thank you, Monkey. You were
I love you all.
amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much,
Bye.
Monkey.
Bye.
See you all
Bye.
soon.